Welcome to Chemistry at Hononegah High School. I'm Brian Brown, and you're probably watching this video today or tonight because your son or daughter has convinced you that they want to get some extra credit from chemistry, and you are the one to help them. So, this is really my opportunity to introduce myself. Back to school night, while we do get a number of parents here, which is great, for a variety of reasons, not everybody can make it. And that means that, we miss that communication at the beginning. And this is a chance for me to explain a little bit about what's happening on a daily basis in class with your son or daughter, and to remind you of what resources are available so that they don't slip through the cracks and they end up doing the best they possibly can. Because while you might not be able to help them daily with chemistry, you can help them stay on track and you can remind them of some of the key things that they need to be doing on a daily basis. So this is really the importance of this video to me, is to communicate with you so you understand exactly what's going on so you can help your son or daughter do the best they can. So my name is Brian Brown. Uh, my easiest way to get a hold of me is through email at bbrown@hononegah.org. Anytime you have any questions or would like to see what's happening in the class, what's happening with grades, although now you can get access a different method, which I'll be talking about. But if you do ever have a question, easiest way is to use email because it's easy to hit reply and then respond. And if we need more one-on-one, we can always set up a time to talk. Also, easiest way to find out what's happening in class is to use my Haiku Learning account. And one of the reasons why this is the new version of the parent movie is because um, I've decided the way I'm going to set it up is every year I'm going to do /bbrown /chemistry and then the year. So this year it's the 14-15 school year. So really it'd be 2015. And your son or daughter can always help you get to their account using their username and password. But I've set it as open so anybody can get in if they really just use the hononegah.haikulearning.com /Brian Brown or /bbrown /chemistry 2015, 2016, whatever happens to be on that current year. Now, even though this comes later on in the sheet that you should have already printed out to get to this point, because remember, you're following the directions on that questionnaire to jump through all those hoops so they get that 2% of extra credit. But it is one of the things that parents want to know right up front and are typically the most concerned about is, how do you do grades? What should I be looking for? Well, in chemistry, we use a 90, 80, 70, 60 scale because it's easy to remember. And I do round up at the half. So if they work very hard and get an 89.6, that becomes an A minus. But if they get an 89.4, that's going to stay a B plus. For quarter grades, 20% is homework, 20% is lab, and 60% is test quiz. So since 60% is by far the biggest percentage, one of the most important things about how well they do in the class is what their test average is. And that's something that there are a variety of resources that can help them get ready. If they say they're a bad test taker, that's because they're a bad test taker right now. They don't need to stay there because I make it very, very clear exactly what's going to be on the test. And it then becomes up to them. Have they practiced enough to understand it? But you'll notice that homework and lab add up to 40%, which is very, very close to the 60%. So if they do remain a poorer test taker than they do with daily work, through homework and lab and what they can do in those two areas to maximize those grades, they should be able to help make up if they do struggle a little bit on tests. But remember, nobody needs to continue to struggle on tests. If they're in this class, they can handle this material, they can do well on every single test if they're taking the time. Yes, it's easier for some students than others, but everybody has the ability, if they're here, to do a work if they want to take the time to do it. And then semester grade is 40%, 40%, 20%. So really they need to pad those quarter grades as much as they can to survive that final. Because while it is nice to think, the final I can do really, really well and raise my grade, you're taking a test over all the stuff we've done the entire semester. It's cumulative through the semester. Even if I take all the easiest concepts, because of the sheer amount of material, it's a difficult test. So really, they need to take control of their quarter grades so that they get the semester grade they want, and they can survive if they happen to struggle a little bit on the final. Now, one of the biggest things you need to know is, well, what do I need, or how do I know when they need help? So how do I know when to get help? How do I know what they're doing in class? Well, the first one is really just ask your son or daughter. Starting about the third week of each quarter in the back of the classroom, I post grades. I try and keep my grade book updated on a regular basis. So every single week they should know exactly where they're at because I post them at the back of the classroom. And it's actually the grade book. It's not under their name, it's under their school ID number, so it's private, but they can actually see until we have, a large number in the quarter. They can actually see exactly what they have in my grade book. And that used to be really, really, really important. But starting September 11th of the 2015 school year and the third, I should say after 3 weeks, whatever day that happens to be. So it's not the third week, it's actually 3 weeks after the first day. They're going to be opening each semester parent and student access to see my grade book, which is a huge, huge thing. Because at any time you want to know exactly where they're at in the class, all you really need to do is go into family access, or they can go into student access, and you can see at any time. And that's something that I have the link here. You can go to that. It's basically a part of the school website. So if you go under parents, you'll be able to find the family access login area, and there it has directions on how you need to do it. But that's a really important tool for you to stay up to date on exactly what's happening in class. And that means that eventually I may stop doing the third bullet point here, and that's read your email. I will still send sometimes. I used to do it starting the third week every single week. So I'll probably try and do it bi-weekly just so if it's been a while since you forgot, you may get that email from me, you may check and you may realize, oh, they've got a few missing assignments, they need to get going. Or they struggled on that last test, this next test is important. Or they struggled on that last test, did they do their review corrections and did they take the practice test for extra credit to help get ready for it? Did they do what they need to do? So I will still be periodically, probably about bi-weekly, sending out a parent email that has a PDF that shows exactly where their grade book is. And at any time you want to, if you're having trouble with parent access, you can always send me an email and I can give a detailed printout of exactly where the grade is. So how do you know when to help them? Well, know where their grade is. They should know it and you should be able to easily find it. All you need is access to the computer. Now, what happens if they have low test grades? Because that's one of the most important areas in their grade. So it's one of the most important things for you to understand exactly what goes into a test and exactly how can they prepare for it and what do I make available to make that preparation easier. Well, one of the biggest things is I don't want it to be a surprise what's on the test. I want them to know exactly what's there. It's what we do in notes and what we talk about daily in class. It's what they practice on their daily homework. It's what they practice on the review and any quizzes that we get before we get to that test. So I'm very, very, very straightforward. In chemistry, we give them an objective sheet for the chapter. It's stapled on top of their notes in my class. So when they get their notes at the beginning of the chapter, they've got their objective sheet and it shows exactly what it is that's going to be on the test. So make sure they're actually using it to prepare for the test. The day before the test, we actually do an objectives activity because when you actually look at their sheet, you'll notice there's some blanks on it. Well, I've left some important blanks out, not to make it harder, but to give us an opportunity the day before the test, do a last review and look at what those key ideas are. So they do a review activity where they look at filling in the blanks. And they always make sure they get the right answers from me before they leave class that day. And the sheet shows exactly what you need to know to prepare for the test. It even shows how many points from that objective are on the test and exactly which questions deal with those objectives. So that way we can use it in analysis after the test so they can see what they did right and what they did wrong and which objectives they were strong and weak on because that final is coming. And if they miss those things in the regular test, they need to make sure they come in and get help. And it's really the single most important review item to help prepare for a test. So very quickly, what does that look like? Well, let me pull up an example here. So this is basically for chapter 3, which typically if you're watching this movie, that's where we should be at right now, is in chapter 3. This is what the objective sheet looks like. Up top, they already see that there's going to be 78 points possible on this test. And here's where they're going to put their grade and calculate what their percent is, so there's no surprise as to where they're at. You can see from the vocabulary, because the first objective here is key terms. From the vocabulary, there's going to be one question related to vocabulary from this chapter, and that's what's shown over here. And when they do their analysis, they'll be seeing, did they get that one right? And it's actually question 2. So they even see which questions deal with this. Second objective, know how to measure to the correct accuracy and with appropriate units using different measuring devices. Well, that's going to be question 53, 54, and 55 towards the end of the test. And that's going to be worth a total of 3 points. So they can actually go through and they can see what is it they need to know, which questions on the test will deal with it, and how many points is that going to come from or contribute to their overall grade. So I want it to be very, very explicit. What are they doing? And just to give you a look, this is what my notes look like. We go through in class. I've got PowerPoints and Smartboard that we use, and they're not writing, they're filling in blanks because I want them to spend less time copying and more time listening and discussing what it is that we're talking about. So when they fill in notes, it's already a nice, neat format. They just need to fill in the blank as we go through and do it. And that way their notes become much more useful for them to prepare for tests. So let me jump back in. So besides the objective sheet, what else can you do if they have low test grades? Well, I post a practice test online for every single chapter. So if you go into my Haiku website, go to chapter 2 or chapter 3, you'll see that the practice test is already posted there. It's a practice test that covers the objectives. It hits all the vocab. It hits all the main math ideas and all of the important concepts that they're going to be doing on the test. So it's a way to practice in a variety of different ways and types of questions the key ideas. So it's their chance to actually see, well, can I do the material or not? And at the end of the practice test, the answers are there. So once they take the test, and I tell them to take it like it's a real test. So don't use your homework, don't use your notes. Just get your periodic table, grab a pencil, and grab the test copy, and take it for real. And then afterwards go through and grade it, and you can see what things you're still hazy on. And you can use that as a tool to help strengthen those weaknesses. So if they actually do that, and they can do it at any time, but I usually recommend it's part of their study the night before so it's fresh in their mind, is they go through, take it, then they correct it. If they bring that in the next day in class, so if they remember to bring that in, I actually give an extra credit question on the current test. And that's usually between 1% and 3% on their test grade. So if they're not doing their practice tests, and there were only 4 or 5 people on the first test that did the practice test, second test I got as many as 7 or 8. But that's out of a class of 24, still a lot of students not taking advantage of things that can help them do better on the test. Now, what does the practice test look like? Here's an example. So this is a one for chapter 3. So it has some visual questions, many of them in multiple choice format. There are some that are matching. For some math problems, I often have areas where them to do the math problem. And if that's the case, then at the end, I'm going to show them the exact solution when they go through and take a look at the answers. And you also notice the answers sometimes don't just have the answer. There's a description about why that's the answer to give them a greater depth of knowledge. So that's what the practice tests look like. And this is the practice test for chapter 3. So they sit down, they take the test, and then they would grade it, and they use that as part of their review to help them do better in the class. Because after all, 60% is a huge chunk of their test. Also, ask them if they're doing their homework corrections, which we'll talk about shortly here. Because when I assign homework, 100% of the time they should be getting close to 100% on it because a large chunk of the time is just a completion grade. And the rest of the time, it's something they can correct. So if they have attempted it and it's a completion grade and they've got it all done, they're going to get 100%. If they had things wrong and it's for points, doing those corrections makes them practice again the things they struggle with. And if they can do it that second time through, they're much more likely to do it that third time on the review and that fourth time when they get to the test. So homework corrections are something they should take advantage of every single time. When it comes back to them, if it's correctable, they should do the corrections because it really does pay off on the test. Encourage them to come in before or after school for help. I'm available every day before and usually after school, but sometimes I've got to get to things with kids or I'm busy with robotics. So it's a good idea to make sure after school they double check with me. And yes, before school there's sometimes meetings, but when they come to the door, they can see if I'm not there and they can wait for me. Now, sometimes it'll only take a few minutes. What for something for them seems insurmountable and can be, a half hour, an hour of frustration, can sometimes be just a minute or two in class. And they may not have the skills to be a better taker at this point, but they can work on obtaining those skills. And we can work together to take a look at what types of things you're doing, where do you typically struggle, and what could you be doing differently, and what resources are available that help you do the best you can. So remember, they don't have to stay a bad test taker. That's just where they're at now. Next, encourage them to use the online resources, which we'll look at later. So there's a number of things on my Haiku website. There's tutorials and so forth to help them if they're struggling with things in the class. Now, what do they do if they have a low homework grade? Well, honestly, low homework grade, I hate to say it, to be blunt, it's usually a little bit of laziness. And I realize they lead busy lives and sometimes things happen, but their homework grade should really never slip below an A. And if it does, you know they're in a problem. So if you're looking at their grade printout, you see their homework is less than A, they're not taking advantage of what they should be taking advantage of on a daily basis to keep that A. Now, why is it that less than an A I consider a danger sign and should never happen? Well, one, homework to me is constant. Pretty much every day of class, they're going to have something for homework, and it's usually going to take them between 5 and 10 minutes. There's always a reading assignment associated with everything we talk about in class, which doesn't take long to skim through. And then there is the homework that they're doing from a worksheet or from the book. And I want them thinking every day I've got to do chemistry, and every day it's going to be quick to get it over with. So hopefully chemistry is one of the first things they do because they're in the habit of always doing it and realizing it's always going to be quick, or should say most of the time it's going to be quick. Now, all the homework is going to be graded for points 100% of the time, but we're going to grade it together in class, and they're going to find out how many points they got right on it. And at that point, when they turn it into me, one of two things is going to happen. One, it's going to be a completion grade. More than half the time, it says half here, but it's probably closer to 60%. If they've done the entire homework assignment and they made a legitimate effort, they're going to get 100%. Now you'll know in the homework grade if it was a completion grade because they're always worth 5 points. And if they get a 5 for every one of those, you know they're doing their homework to completion every single day. So that's probably the biggest thing. It's a useful skill. We talk about grit at Hananiga, and not giving up is something that applies not just in everyday life, but specifically in chemistry. Some of the things will be hard, some of the things will be challenging. That's just going to happen. But you've got the tools and resources available to do it. And if you can't do it, you can at least try and then get help. So if you just tried half the time, you're going to get 100% in your homework grade. The remaining half of the time, it's going to be for points. So it's a correctable homework assignment. So about the other half of the time, typically 40 to 50%, when they get it back, it's not going to have a red number over the top of it, a 0 through a 5 based upon completion. It's going to still say what it said, 15 out of 28, 6 out of 14, whatever. Well, I've put in pencil that grade in my grade book, and they've got 2 days to redo anything that they had wrong on a separate sheet of paper. They clearly mark it as corrections and put the name on top. They staple on the top of the old assignment so I can look right away at what their corrections are. The old assignment's there so I can look back to see if they were correcting what they were supposed to, and sometimes to see what their thought process was if they're still having trouble with it. They staple it on top and they turn it within 2 days, and they can earn back every single point that they got wrong as long as they've attempted everything. So if they've attempted it all, they can always get 100% on the corrections. Now, if they haven't attempted it all and a student is struggling, I'll still let them usually get points back on their corrections, but they're not going to get 100% anymore. Next thing, ask if they have missing or uncorrected homework, or go into parent access and see, do they have, homework assignments that were out of different than 5 points that aren't 100% right? That's probably a corrected assignment that they didn't correct. Now, they might have still struggled and missed a few, but it should be significantly better than what it was the first time through. After we're all, because we've gone through it in class, they've seen and heard what all the answers are, and they've got 2 days to get help to redo it if they need it. So ask them and check, are they missing things? Do they have uncorrected homework? Now, where do I go to find out what is happening in class on a daily, day-to-day basis? So, what do I do if they're homesick and they miss a day? Well, what you really do is you go into my Haiku website. So let me pull that up here. So if you go into my Haiku site, it'll open up to the chemistry daily schedule. Now this looks slightly different than what you would see because anything over here that is colored is actually active right now, and the rest of them are things that I haven't turned on. So you're going to see right now the chemistry daily schedule, and then you see 1, 2, 3. 4, and then any other chapters, as I say, turn them on. But if you look at the chemistry daily schedule, you can see exactly what we've done every single day of the school year. And as we get to the next chapter, I put the next chapter up and I leave the previous ones there. Now, homework, after the homework is a set of brackets, and that would basically tell you when the due date is for that homework assignment. And if you see parentheses, that's dealing with, what the note PowerPoint slides were, because the PowerPoint is available online. And if they want to go in and see what we looked at or review, they can see my PowerPoint. But this year I'll also make a movie of every set of home or notes that we do. So it might be more effective to not look at the PowerPoint, but actually just watch the movie so they can actually hear me reteach the information. But you can then see exactly what's happening on a daily basis. So you can see, did you in class today Like yesterday, we had the scientific notation worksheet. So did you complete the scientific notation worksheet? Do you have it done? And if they don't have it done, they can also go online and print it out because that's also on the site. So if you go into chapter 3, which is our current active chapter, you can see information. There's some guided tutorials over here to help them. I usually have a brief description of the chapter. I mentioned this one's the most important chapter all year because we use it pretty much every chapter. And then there's the download. So all the worksheets that we do, you can print them off right here. So if they didn't have their scientific notation worksheet, if they don't have their notes, they can get access to all those things. It's also where the practice test is, and it's also where the note movies are. You can see I've got a few of them up and active here for chapter 3. So that is what is really available online. So if they are sick and missing, they can go online and actually see the notes and copy them at home so when they come back, they're ready. What if they've lost a worksheet and they've left it at school? Well, they can go onto my Haiku site and they can actually print it out. Are there any tutorials that might help them with the material they're struggling on? All those things are on my Haiku website. And remember, if they miss class because of an appointment or an illness, they don't have to come back to class behind. If they're well enough to actually take a look at it, or a day later after they come back to school, they can go back and they can actually hear exactly what we did in notes over those days so that they have a better understanding and they don't miss anything. So on the Haiku website, all daily assignments and due dates through the next test, links to tutorials and extra help websites. All the current worksheets can be downloaded, including the PowerPoint notes if they want to look at it that way, or the note movie where they can actually see what's on the notes. And that finishes um, some of the things that I wanted to make you aware of to help when you're in that situation of, well, how do I know how they're doing in class? How do I know if they're doing what they should be doing? What can I tell them or remind them to do if they happen to be struggling? So remind them to take the practice test, remind them to do their corrections, double check to see that they're turning things in, and see if they're all fives on the completion grades. That will tell you if it's complete or not, or if they've been turning things in late. So use the resource available, and it can help make their year a whole lot easier. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me and fill out the sheets, get that stuff into school, and you can earn your son or daughter extra credit.